Feeling trapped. J.R.R. Tolkien, in his famous essay on fairy stories, responding to the dismissive attitude toward fantasy stories, it's often leveled, oh, they're just escapism. And Tolkien uh, wrote, I have claimed that escape is one of the main functions of fairy stories. And since I do not disapprove of them, it is plain that I do not accept the tone of scorn or pity with which escape is now so often used. Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? Or if he cannot do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls. So, this is a key aspect of high level fantasy writing, which Tolkien, a Orthodox Catholic, called subcreation, is that you are actually creating worlds better in certain ways than the one we find ourselves in. And why wouldn't that be a very crucial and valuable thing? It may also help to seed alternate realities, as Lord of the Rings did. I mean, if you look at Dungeons and Dragons and a thousand different cultural things that were really offshoots of his books, you can see that they did alter reality. Do you feel trapped in some way? It's a universal and appropriate feeling given all the constraints of human incarnation. You may feel trapped by where you live, by politics, employment or unemployment, relationships or lack thereof, bodily condition, and many other classic oppressive factors. This card had a strange origin story on February 18th of 2024, about 4 days ago, which is the day that I wrote it on the 18th. Waking up mornings. Well, you know how the famous opening line of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa awoke from uneasy dreams to find he had been turned into a giant cockroach. So on February 18th of 2024, I woke up and found myself in a 66-year-old body, which is a drag, kids. And it's been happening all year. And it, so I wake up often feeling trapped by soreness and being in an aging meat body and this kind of thing. But it's a very common experience. Creatively, it's much more ideal for me to wake up long before dawn and get sealed into my study, where I am right now, before anyone else in the household is awake. Pre-dawn, most people in the surrounding neighborhood are in the dream time. For me, it's the most magical time of day when the forces of mundanity are dormant and psychic noise, which I'm sensitive to, is low. And you can see something I wrote about that. I'll link it to the card here called Pre-Dawn Window Zone. By around 7 a.m., there's a sense of workers waking up and getting ready to commute. I can feel all the machinery of routinized life winding up. But if I'm already in the midst of a writing session, enclosed in my blackout curtained study like I am now, with noise canceling headphones on, creative momentum can carry me past this dreaded zone without interference. Unfortunately, I had stayed up long past midnight the night before and awoke to sounds of activity downstairs, breakfast smells, full daylight streaming through windows, and the machinery of ordinary life up and running. Because I don't live alone, I've got a household of people here. When I miss the inviting and mysterious pre dawn quiet, it exacerbates morning irritability during the 90 minutes or so of exercises and tasks I need to do to get my body back online and everything ready for a writing session. But while I was in that irritable anti magical zone, the world was actually in a state of interactive enchantment, as I would soon discover. Upon awakening, I'd put on the noise-canceling headphones and sought out creative audio content to compensate for the mundanity. Synchronistic, and also to like tune out sounds in the house and stuff like that that might bug me. Synchronistically, the two things I chose to listen to directly addressed my oppressed mood and presented me with the theme of this card. And I didn't know what was coming in these things that I put on. So before I even get out of bed, I do some like stretches and things like that. And during that time, I was listening to The Magicians by Lev Grossman. It's part of his Magician trilogy, superb fantasy series. And very specifically, I was listening to a part in book one that was like a disillusioned postmodernist version of a C.S. Lewis story. 5 British siblings, children, have discovered a magical world called Fillory. One of them, Rupert, who now, when he's writing his account, is a young man, is writing about Fillory while he's in London during World War II as the city is being destroyed by the Blitz. Rupert narrates that 3 out of 5 of his siblings, including himself, came to visit and think of Fillory less and less as they got older and more engaged with the ordinary world. Rupert has become ever more disenchanted with Fillory, as it turns out to be even darker than the mundane world, and permanently entraps 2 of his siblings. His brother Martin hated London and had lost some of his innocence there, but in Fillory, he lost all of it and became monstrous. Rupert realizes, quote, Fillory was cruel, as cruel in its way as the real world was. There was no difference, though we all pretended there was. There was nothing fair about Fillory, just as there was nothing fair about people's fathers going to war, and their mothers going mad, and the way we, among all animals, were cursed with the longing for somewhere better, somewhere that never existed and never would. Fillory was no better than our world. It was just prettier. Unquote. It's a key insight. You can become trapped in the unconscious and other dimensions as much as you can in ordinary life. Middle Earth has Rivendell, but also Mordor. There are lighter and darker zones everywhere. In Fillory, Rupert follows Martin into a liminal, unformed zone. Quote, this was new. Martin had taken us somewhere truly strange. Fillory was a land of wonders, but this place had an uncanny quality that I can only describe as not correct. It was a place that shouldn't have been, somewhere off the edge of the board where you weren't meant to put a playing piece down. To enter incarnation, unquote, to enter incarnation is to enter the realm of story. A life is a narrative in some ways. It has a beginning and an end called birth and death. And there is no more classic story element than feeling trapped by fate and having to undergo a difficult journey to break free. After listening to some of the magicians land, it was time to stand on my whole body vibration machine for 12 minutes. So my custom when I'm going to do that is then I will shift to my iPad, because otherwise I'd just be staring at the wall, and now I've got some like chance to watch some video content. I put on the last episode of the superb TCM series, The Power of Film, and here's how TCM describes the series. The Power of Film is a 6-part television event from legendary UCLA film professor emeritus Howard Suber, and he analyzes why certain films have remained both popular and memorable for generations. As I watched the last part of the last episode, the whole body vibration came to reverberate through my whole psyche as Suber brought the theme of the morning into consciousness. He concludes the series with The Wizard of Oz and points out, as far as I can tell, no movie is more loved than The Wizard of Oz, so that's where we're going to end. Its central character is trapped, is lost. Suber began the series by pointing out that the central theme of the most popular movies is being trapped by fate. He points that out in episode 1. It's the most universally appealing theme because it's how most of the audience feels in their lives. In The Shawshank Redemption, another super popular film we've all seen, the hero Andy, played by Tim Robbins, has been wrongly convicted of murder and is trapped in Shawshank State Penitentiary, serving 2 consecutive life sentences. In Shawshank, he endures rape and is punished by long solitary confinement. But Andy does not abandon hope, and for nearly 20 years, he chips away with a small rock hammer to carve a tunnel from his prison cell. Finally, he escapes by crawling through an excrement-filled sewer pipe. And it's pretty much as archetypal as it could be, like crawling through the belly of the beast and to get out of the trap. And as Morgan Freeman's voiceover narrates, Andy crawled to freedom through 500 yards of shit-smelling foulness I can't even imagine, or maybe I just don't want to. 500 yards. That's the length of 5 football fields, just shy of half a mile. And that was like crawling on his belly. And then, and I put up an image, but you can also like watch on YouTube these moments of the film, in case you've forgotten. He emerges from the sewer pipe into a stream, and there's cleansing rain, and he stands in the rain and he lifts his arms up in ecstatic fulfillment of his desire to escape the trap after almost 20 years. And it's just an archetypal moment, and it's a moment that we all long for in some way. Similarly, The Wizard of Oz begins with Dorothy Gale, an orphan living a lonely life with a foster family in black and white Kansas. Now, if you read the book, this is a really grim world of meager subsistence farming. Dorothy feels trapped in this world and expresses her desire to escape in the classic song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I include the YouTube clip and the lyrics. My voice is at least 10% worse than Judy Garland at that age, so I won't try and sing this. But if you think about, I'll just a couple of the excerpts. I mean, it's the most archetypal human situation of feeling trapped when all the world is a hopeless jumble. Heaven opens a magic lane. There's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? So it's all about that desire to escape the trap. And Dorothy is living a very lonely, grim life, without peers around. She's just living on the subsistence farm with these much older foster parents who are kind of depressed. As Suber narrates, this deep desire to get out of here, out of this trap. She wants to get out of this place. The Wizard of Oz is the most beloved movie of all time because it expresses that universal longing to escape our oppressive matrix. It was a longing I felt growing up during the most dangerous decades of the Bronx. Felt it constantly. One time, as a young teenager, I was feeling oppressed by the ugliness of the New York City subway system and my life in the Bronx when I entered a long underground passage somewhere in Lower Manhattan subway station, maybe Union Square or 34th Street, and I found a brilliant saxophonist doing a surrealized blues rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow that echoed in the reflective acoustics of the ceramic-lined passage. The elongated notes of dilated time, as though the sax were expressing the underlying mood of the whole city. was one of the most haunting musical moments of my life, erasing the boundary between inner longing to escape and the outside world. Growing up, I also had glowing moments of escape. When I was a small child, we took memorable trips to visit my grandparents who lived on a 10-acre chicken farm that seemed to exist in an alternate dimension. It actually looked a lot like where Dorothy was in Kansas. It was like a place that time forgot. Here's a picture of my mom. I'm sure it was before I was born on that very chicken farm, and she almost looks like Dorothy. This would have been a picture taken by my dad, who was an excellent photographer. Okay, and as you can see, it's black and white. This was before color had been um, existed anywhere in the world. We didn't have colors. A lot of people don't know until like the 1950s. I actually know a Gen Z who actually thought that and asked my mom, um, what was it like before there was color? Anyway, um, but for me, it was a colorful world and a tremendous reprieve from the Bronx. Then there was my first night really escaping the Bronx, which also required the need to escape my parents. Not that they were terrible parents, but most people want to kind of escape their parents at that age and family situation. And so the first moment of really doing that was going to sleepaway camp, Jewish socialist summer camp in the Catskills. Growing up in a metropolis on a clear night, a half dozen stars might be dimly visible, and I just thought that's all you could see. So on my first night at this camp, far from light pollution, I looked up and I was just stunned by this galaxy of brilliant stars in the night sky. And we were, 3,000 feet or something above uh, sea level where I had lived most of my life. The hippie counselors who ran this camp took me to my first rock concert in upstate New York, where I saw Jethro Tull opening for The Who and discovered the magic of the 60s. Then at 16, I escaped the Bronx for what felt like a different planet. That was when I started college, a small private college, Ursinus College in Pennsylvania. I remember looking out my dorm room that first night. Instead of seeing the elevated number 4 train rattling past my window, it was a half block away, I saw the idyllic woodsy campus that had just become my new world. There was another haunting moment when I was 12 or 13 that filled me with longing for greater adventure. I was with my family in Kennedy Airport about to board an amazing new aircraft that had just been invented, the first jumbo jet, a 747, still an amazing aircraft, to travel to Europe. I was thrilled to explore this unfamiliar continent, but we were going on a canned package trip by the American Express credit card company. These packaged European tours for Americans, about like 18 days worth, were so popular and stereotypical that a movie about them called If It's Tuesday, This Must Be Belgium came out in 1969, about a year before we went on this trip. So as we waited to board the 747, there were a couple of hippies across from us who had backpacks and guitars, and they were beautiful, numinous, and glowing with vitality and a sense of impending adventure. I felt this poignant longing to go on their sort of adventure, as if I could go with them instead of a package tour with my parents and sister. Now, obviously, that might seem an ungrateful, privileged first world frustration, but it's what I felt at 12 or 13. Later in life, and continuing into the present, I fulfilled this longing, traveling the country and the world with beautiful, numinous, mutant companions. As amazing as those adventures were and are, the greatest escape and fulfillment in my life began, ironically and paradoxically, with the coronavirus lockdown. Starting on April 6th of 2020, I resumed 7-day-a-week work, which had stopped on December 3rd of 2017 for reasons I mention elsewhere. But I decided, okay, I'm gonna give it another shot. I've been trying to write this book since 1978, basically, but with the first complete version happening in the mid 80s. And that was my 45-year top of the bucket list, top of the life mission task to write this, Parallel Journeys. Read it free on the website. You can also get it on Amazon as a physical book, as a Kindle, and as an Audible, read by me. So I had, on the day my household officially locked down, my friend Andrew, who, speaking of travel adventures, had a few years before been my traveling companion on a 25-country tour, 2016, we were getting the house ready for the lockdown. He found a dusty case in the garage. And inside that case, that I had inherited from my dad and brought with 6 Sprinter loads of stuff from their house in the Bronx, was an antique Corona typewriter, turn of the century. So any Gen Z out there, this is basically what computers look like about 5 years before you were born. No screen, 0K RAM, okay? Corona typewriter. And in the back of the case was a manual for it, which I happen to have right here. And look what it says. Corona, your personal writing machine. And that is exactly what happened. The coronavirus lockdown became my personal writing machine. And obviously there were moments during the lockdown where I felt trapped, like we all did. But this was actually one of the great adventures of my entire life, and a fulfilling a desire to escape into other realities. Find my place here. Every morning I entered a portal into alternate realities and had the greatest adventures of my life in these imaginal dimensions. Writing about what unfolded there was the greatest creative fulfillment of my life. Parallel Journeys had blurred boundaries with my earthbound life, and there are numerous crossover experiences where these parallel lives merged in mind-blowing ways. So, another point of relevance is that Parallel Journeys is an epic story of characters trapped and finding escape. But that shouldn't be so surprising because that is such a classic theme in so many stories and movies. Human incarnation is bound to feel like a trap during parts of our journey through it. The world that Dorothy escapes to through an interdimensional vortex, a tornado, is beyond the rainbow, as the song puts it. Well, there is a widely reported dimension beyond the spectrum of colors we know on Earth, beyond the rainbow. It is a dimension beyond the event horizon of death. I'm looking for another thing here. Where'd it go? I'm looking for a copy of my book. Here it is. Also, can read the second edition free on the website, so I'm not selling you anything. You can get a physical copy on Amazon if you want. But chapter 3 of this book is it's called Singularity Archetype and Near-Death Experience. And there it is. And I linked it up in the body of the card. You can read it free on the website. So here is a world beyond the rainbow. Here's how I describe it. And I think we have some garbage trucks out there. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to escape, is the mundane world with garbage trucks backing up and all that kind of stuff we have to deal with on a daily basis. We all want a way out of that. For some people, it's an expensive, going on an expensive cruise trip or something. But ultimately, we all have a guaranteed escape hatch called, popularly known as, death. Another classic element of NDEs is the perception of uncannily intense or previously unknown colors. Remember from the song Beyond the Rainbow. Typically, these perceptions occur when the experiencer has crossed through the tunnel, like Dorothy crosses through the tornado, and gotten to the other side. For example, Howard Storm, an atheistic art professor prior to his NDE, observes, "We traversed an enormous distance, although very little time seemed to elapse. Then off in the distance I saw a vast area of illumination that looked like a galaxy. In the center there was an enormously bright concentration. Outside the center, countless millions of spheres of light were flying about, entering and leaving what was a great beingness at the center. The radiance emanating from the luminous spheres contained exquisite colors of a range and intensity that far exceeded anything I, as an artist, had ever experienced. It was similar to looking at the opalescence one experiences looking into a white pearl, or the brilliance of a diamond." Now, technically, as a gemologist and former diamond grader, the brilliance of a diamond is flashes of white light. What he really means is dispersion, which would be the flashes of prismatic light from a diamond. Joseph, a 46-year-old author, publisher, and businessman, said this about his NDE. Quote, "At first I became aware of beautiful colors, which were all the colors of the rainbow. They were magnified in crystallized light and beamed with a brilliance in every direction. It was as if all this light was coming at me through a prism made by a most beautiful and purified diamond, and yet at the same time, it was as if I were the center." So, by the way, people who really have fulfilled escaping the trap temporarily are many people who've had positive near-death experiences. Coming back, which they're often highly reluctant to do, can feel that like they're returning to the trap. Or as one woman put it, "Coming back to my body felt like putting on dirty underwear." So, but the people who've had these profound positive near-death experiences, and we have a higher percentage of the population experiencing that than at any other time in history or prehistory because of the explosion of resuscitation technology. So people don't realize we know much more about death than any other generation has, because we've brought so many people back from what meets every clinical definition of death, to where now they say that if the Titanic happened today, they could send in boats hours later, because the bodies would have been brains would have been preserved by the cold water, and they could restart most of them hours later. Stella, a 41-year-old woman whose the other thing I was going to say about another way to escape the trap. So the people who have the NDEs, when they've done prospective studies and compared them to control groups that had cardiac arrest and no NDE, these were conducted by Dr. Pim van Lommel. I had lunch with him twice. He was a Dutch cardiologist who followed patients in like 7 Dutch hospitals. Some had cardiac arrest with no NDE, and then he followed the ones that had the NDE. And those that had it, their lives were transformed ever after. It wasn't just like a one-time event. They lost their fear of death. They had escaped the trap and no longer could take it so seriously when they had to come back to it for a time. to finish their lifespan, in other words. But it's also been shown by studies by Dr. Kenneth Ring, for example, that just reading these encounters has a viral effect that parallels the effects of NDEs themselves, because the testimonies are so convincing that it can affect you similar to having an NDE. So here's how Stella, a 41-year-old woman whose NDE was caused by a massive hemorrhaging following surgery, described what she found beyond the rainbow. The flowers and the flower buds by that street, the intensity, the vibrant colors, like pebbles that have been polished in a running stream, but they were all like precious stones, rubies and diamonds and sapphires. So this is a very common experience that people will have in their NDEs, is they'll find themselves in this place that's sometimes called the green world, where flowers seem to be illuminated from within and this kind of thing. But there are dark NDEs. They're not as common, so I don't want to give a false impression. Dorothy escapes the grim, mundane world through an interdimensional tornado and finds herself in the Technicolor world of Oz. But other dimensions, including some afterlife ones, have their own traps. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes bardos, where souls who are unprepared for this great transition become trapped. The key allies Dorothy meets in Oz, the Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow, are all developmentally trapped. So if you feel trapped in some way, you are not alone. You are having the most classic of human experiences. Journeying through life and beyond, we are likely to experience many traps. And often we sort of think that our trap is more special than others. Maybe we feel trapped by aging and forget how many teenagers feel totally trapped by their lives and are and have a high suicide rate and so forth. Maybe we're struggling financially and we feel trapped by debt. But we forget how many wealthy people commit suicide and feel completely trapped by other things in their lives. So it's no matter where you are on the human spectrum, you're likely to feel trapped by something. Journeying through life and beyond, we are likely to experience many traps, but if we journey in the right way, we will also get to experience our longing to escape fulfilled. After all, every human incarnation comes with a 100% guaranteed escape hatch, popularly known as death, an event horizon shimmering up ahead. If we ask ourselves at key junctures, what will I remember well on my deathbed, and make those life-affirming choices, we will still endure traps, but our journey will take us toward the experience of meaning, where we will find love amidst the ashes. On that journey, we won't grow up. We'll grow forever. Thank you, and good luck freeing yourself from your traps, but some you may just have to endure. We all have some of those. But if you live a rich and varied life, you've also had the experience of escaping traps. And any trap that you're currently in, I guarantee you, is for a limited time only. Like that thing that Abraham Lincoln quoted in a speech where an emperor asked the wise men to come up with a saying that he could use on every occasion that would always be true. And it was, "And this too shall pass."